coming together. And at the very end of last week on Friday in the Q&A, I think it might have been Miblo that asked the question, can we fade out the desktop? And I was sort of throwing together really quickly a way to make that happen, but I didn't have time to actually do it. So what I was thinking we might do today is just quickly take a look at that and see if I can get that working for him. It's not something we will do for Handmade Hero, but it's just, it's a reasonable question. And it seems like the least we can do for someone who spent so much time making a great episode guide for Handmade Hero. So let's take a look. Today is day 225, so if you pre-ordered the game on handmadehero.org and downloaded the source code, you want to start with day 224 source code. That's where I'm starting today. Let's go ahead and bring that up here and see what we can do. All right, so here we are. I believe we were in Win32 Handmade, so that's right here. What we did is we had a little fade out function I was going to hack together. And again, I'm not trying to do a super industrial strength grid in this. I just want to kind of show what the idea was. Now, Martin's Mosaico, who often answers questions on the forums, he reminded me on Twitter that I already covered how to do this a little more simply earlier on. And I forgot about it entirely, but that's true. Instead of using update layered window, we can actually use the set layer window parameters. If you remember way back, I showed how to do this. Let me look it up here. It's like, yeah, set layered window attributes. This one here. I showed how to use this, completely forgot about the function. My brain's old. I don't use these functions very often anymore, so I was just like, poof. Apparently I knew it earlier on, but fortunately Martin's was there to remember. So thank you very much for that, among other things. Thank you for basically answering everyone's questions on the forums all the time, which is actually what Martin's often does. So anyway, let's take a look at this guy, and I'm going to see if I can hack this together. Now remember, what we did is we wanted to fade out the background, and what I said might be the most compatible way to do it, because there's different ways you could do it, but I think maybe the most compatible way to probably do it would be just create a full screen window that's transparent but black, and then gradually increase its opacity until the point where we can actually see it blot out the background. So I'm going to try that. I don't know if it'll work, but I'm just going to try that here to see if that gives us a reasonable effect, and then we can go from there. So I'm going to skip this part. Hopefully we don't have to do it. Again, I'm not sure. We may or may not. I'm going to try using set layered window and see what I can do. So there's our blend function and all that sort of thing. I'm going to call set layered window. You can see that what it has here is it takes the H-wind, right? And that H-wind we already know is the one that we just created for this specific purpose, right? Then we've got a CR key, which is the color key. Now, presumably that's not necessary because, again, that's not going to be in our alpha function. This blend function is presumably not going to actually need that because you can see we can specify it right here. So we're going to do LWA alpha instead of LWA color key, right? So I'm going to grab that out, LWA alpha, and oops, that's no good. And then I just need to specify these this byte alpha value here. So this color ref, I think, like before, is just can be anything. And so really all we need to do is specify that byte, and we'll see how that goes. Okay. And I'm going to sleep for less time there. Okay, so what I want to do here, this alpha value that we specify, it's used to describe the opacity, right? So when it's 0, it's transparent, and when it's 255, it's opaque. So what I should be able to do is just set it to whatever we're setting the alpha value here to, and hopefully that will do something resembling something. I don't actually know if it will, but we're going to find out. So let's see what we get here, and if that, that's, I guess I still have the debugger running or something here. Let's go ahead and fix that. You know, there's to see if the showing is not complete. If it is, then go ahead and set that, right? If it's not, then get rid of that window, right? So this may bring back our bug because it may be that we never actually got rid of the, yeah. So that's good. This is not good. This is bad news bears, right? Because this means we'll probably get our glitch back. I don't know if we will or not, but I feel like that's entirely possible. Probably get our. Obviously, this there, Casey. Nice job. Parentheses, you're fired. That was some pretty great programming there, Casey. Nice job. Parentheses, you're fired. Wow. That was some. That was some pretty great programming there, Casey. Nice job. Parentheses, you're fired. So obviously this is just stupid. This would be calling this all the time, which doesn't even make any sense. That's not what I intended at all. What I wanted to do was probably say this. If fading complete, right? If the fading is complete, then look to see if the showing is not complete. If it is, then go ahead and set that, right? If it's not, then get rid of that window, right? So this may bring back our bug because it may be that we never actually got rid of it. Yeah. So that's good. This is not good. This is bad news bears, right? Because this means we'll probably get our glitch back. I don't know if we will or not, but I feel like that's entirely possible. Well, so good so far. All right, so that's not bad. That's actually not bad. So let's just see now if we successfully got rid of that window, which is what I actually wanted. So now that's good. So now we don't see that window ever, which is what we wanted. And so I think we're in good shape now, right? I think we're in good shape. That's pretty decent. I think everyone's happy. Desktop, right? Which is what we want. That's good. And now if I hit escape, there's our fade out, and hey, there's our fade back to the desktop. So now we're actually working properly. Fade out, run the game, and we can make that fade in if we wanted to, right? We could do that in any number of ways, I suppose. Yeah, that's all good. And then escape, fades out the game, fades back in the desktop, and hopefully, Miblo, that is what you wanted. That's about it. It's not a whole lot. It's not a whole lot. That is what you wanted. Miblo, that is, and hopefully Miblo, that is what you wanted. That's about it. That's about it. There's not a whole lot to say about that, other than hopefully we did what Miblo wanted. And now you know how to fade the desktop in and out. Happy birthday. And again, a big thank you to Martin's Mosaico, who reminded me of something that I ostensibly taught on the stream earlier, but I guess I didn't teach it very well because I myself didn't remember it. What are you going to do? Anyway, let's go ahead and go to the Q&A. In case you have any questions about what you just saw, we can go ahead and answer them now. Miblo says, Casey, you need one more state to wait for alpha-enabled window to show. Miblo says, Casey, you need one more state to wait for alpha-enabled window to show because you might have the same bug when you fade to desktop. Do you think that's true? Because I didn't think that would really be the case, and I'll explain to you why. I also don't see it happen, so I'm assuming I'm right, but I don't really know. So let me explain to you why I didn't think I would have that bug. And here's the reason, right? So set layered window goes through the alpha compositing phase. And as soon as you call it, I believe it goes into the alpha compositing channel of windows, which is synced properly and does its thing. So my assumption is in here, when you go from inactive to fading game, right? As soon as we call SW high, as soon as we call set fade alpha, that layered window is active right then. It's not going through this path, which goes through the message bump. Because set layered window is actually the call that updates the window, whereas show window is actually just a call that kicks off the whole message loop thing. So my assumption is there actually is no bug between these two, because this doesn't go through the same path, right? They're different ways of working. That's my assumption. Again, like I said, I don't know. So until I see a bug, I'm going to assume that that's true. But if somebody encounters it doing that, please let me know, and we can try and reproduce it. But that's my assumption. Oh, that wasn't Miblo. That was M1EL. Sorry. Didn't mean Miblo. Steel Golem, your fading setup seems overcomplicated to me. Why not just take a screenshot, blip that to the back buffer, and fade that? What platforms wouldn't that work for? So there's a number of reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. One is you don't know if you can reliably get a copy of the back buffer. For example, on fade, very complicated. Steel Golem. Steel Golem, your fading setup seems overcomplicated to me. Why not just take a screenshot, blit that to the back buffer, and fade that? What platforms wouldn't that work for? So there's a number of reasons why you wouldn't want to do that. One is you don't know if you can reliably get a copy of the back buffer. For example, suppose that someone is playing an HDCP protected movie and has paused it in the background. Well, you can't get a copy of that from the back buffer because Windows will prevent you from getting a copy of that from the back buffer. And so when you try to fade out, what you'll actually get is in the instant where you transition from the desktop to your buffer, you'll just get garbage where that window was, right? Number two, what if there was an alpha overlay, right? There might be a YUV composite overlay that someone was using on the graphics card. This is like an older thing that was often done, but still, might be happening to this day for all you know, where there's a color key, and the color key is getting replaced by the graphics card with a YUV overlay. That used to happen all the time. That wouldn't capture properly, and again, you'd get that glitch, right? You get that glitch on the transition. Next one. And there's like tons of reasons you don't want to do it. So I'm just listing as many as I can think of. So the next one reason you don't want to do it that way is because you don't know what the resolution of the desktop is, right? So what you'd have to do first is you'd have to ask what the resolution of the desktop is, because if you actually just create a back buffer that's the resolution that you want to run the game at, right? And you either are going to change the display resolution to your game, or you're going to just you're going to do stretch blit to put it up there, or you've got the OpenGL is going to go full screen. Who knows what happens, right? If your resolution doesn't match the desktop resolution, then on that part where you're about to fade out, everything changes. You get it all goes crunky, because like let's say the resolution of your game is 1080 by 1280 by 1024 or something like that, right? And the desktop resolution was 2400 by whatever, 2440 or by whatever. The screen's gonna first down res and then fade out, right? And so in order to combat that, you would have to do something where you first created a back buffer that was the resolution of the desktop, copied to that, faded out in that, closed that down, created a back buffer for your game, which was the game's resolution, bring that up, right? And so now who's more overcomplicated? All of a sudden, this thing that was like less complicated than just having this window is actually way more complicated and has way more things that can go wrong, right? So really, that's just a really bad idea. And if you can get away without doing that, I don't think you want to, because doing the fade this way goes entirely through Windows Composite Engine. And so as long as Windows is able to composite, we're good, right? That's what I would say. Why are you using a second window for the fade in? Why are you using a second window for the fade in instead of just fading in the main window? Very glad you asked that question. That is what I would have done a couple months ago. However, I was actually playing recently with layered windows and transparency, and what I found was that if you set the layered window flag on your window, your performance goes to, I won't say the word on the stream because this is for children as well. We're trying to keep this safe for children. But point being, you don't get very good performance. Setting the layered flag actually reduces your performance dramatically. And I don't know if this is necessarily true for stretch blit, which is what we're using now, but it is definitely true for OpenGL, which is what we will use eventually, right? And so you absolutely, positively, 100% in no way ever, 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 ever want to set the layered window flag if you are trying to do high performance graphics. It just doesn't work. It's not the fast path for OpenGL, so there's just problems in the driver, I guess, where whatever it has to negotiate with Windows just isn't right. So yeah, I would love to actually do it that way. That would be way more sensical, but it doesn't work in Windows. It's unreliable in terms of performance. Miblo, Miblo, wow, thank you for such a comprehensive answer to my question. That's exactly what I wanted. Another small one, would it be possible to make bits of the window transparent, e.g. for the situation where some monster, or monstar, as you said, has torn a hole in the game window, revealing dust of a leaf? Unfortunately, no. It is not possible for the reason I just said. Which is to say that technically, you could totally do that with the layered window things. But performance-wise, you can't. Because for some reason, you get really bad behavior when you go through that layered window path. Like, I tested this myself, and literally just setting the flag, even if you did not use it, meaning even if you were still at full opacity, so there was no actual transparency occurring, just setting the flag reduced OpenGL performance dramatically. Like, dramatically. Like a very measurable number of milliseconds. And again, maybe that's fixed in, Windows 10 or something, so maybe you could do it on certain Microsoft platforms, but definitely on the platform, on the machine that I was even testing on. I didn't have to go test it on like hundreds of machines to find it. My dev machine, it didn't work. Mr. Forza mentioned, suppose you're Microsoft, but instead of wanting all the money in the world, you just want to make a living selling your operating system. Do you think you could do that while providing a good way for users of your platform to debug the code that uses your API? Yes, I strongly suspect that you could, because I'll be honest, I really don't think there would be much difference to Microsoft's actual business model if they just flat out ship the source code to everything but the kernel level stuff. Like shipping the source code to user 32 would not change Microsoft sales at all. At all. In fact, it might increase them because people could debug it better and security researchers could find bugs faster and help patch the OS and all the bugs in it, So I think they absolutely could. Because no one is going to step through kernel code anyway unless you're really, really hardcore and have a kernel debugger set up, which very, very few people do. So you don't need to ship the source code to all the other stuff, but you could absolutely ship the source code to the higher level stuff. And if there's certain parts of it that you don't want to ship, don't ship those parts. But Microsoft already ships Symbol Server, which has the symbols for stack traces, so you do know where in the code you are. You just don't get any actual source. You just only could see the assembly, right? I think they should just ship the source to that. Just forget it. Just ship the source. And then people could just step through it. I don't think it would affect their business model at all. If anything, I think it would improve it. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? Insofar as, can you not unset the layered window flag after doing the fade? So do not 100% quote me on this, but I am 99.99999% positive I tried exactly that, and the answer is no. If you, what you might be able to do, and I don't know because I don't think I tried this, but what you might be able to do is unset the layered window flag, destroy the OpenGL context, and create a new OpenGL context, or something like that. Or only create the OpenGL context after you unset the layered window flag or something. That might work, because it might be that it's when you create the OpenGL context that it does it. I don't know, right? I don't know. But simply unsetting the flag is not sufficient, right? So yeah. So if this is something you really cared about a lot, right? You could go do some more testing. I did not test it extensively. I did not exhaustively sit down and see, can I make this work, right? I was just oh, whoa, didn't know that one. Okay, I won't set this anymore because it wasn't critical what I was doing. But if you were no, I've got to make the thing that does this, then you might be able to do something oh, I do some rendering, and it's slower and less efficient when I do the transparent stuff, but then as soon as I'm untransparent, I do this other stuff. I shut down the context, create a new context, whatever. You might be able to make something work. I don't know. But the trivial case of just unsetting the flag, I'm pretty much positive I tried that, and no, it doesn't help. If all you do is unset the flag, that doesn't restore the performance. Steel Golem, wait. Steel Golem, wait, why can I alt print screen to capture HDCP with Windows, but I can't take a screen cap manually? I have lots of screenshots of my PS3 through the player via print screen. So it depends entirely on what the, like, I guess what I should say is what the content protections actually are, is my understanding. So for example, I don't really know, what, like, I don't know the details of the HDCP spec, if that makes sense, and what you are and are not allowed to do. All I know is that it's definitely possible for it to be prevented, for it to be prohibited for you to capture video. It's like full on, not even like, you're not even allowed to do it, right? So I don't know what the circumstances are where that happens, but it definitely does happen. And the PS3 doesn't have HDCP, by the way, by default, right? The PS3 will only send out HDCP, as far as I know. It only sends out HDCP if you're playing actual HDCP media. I don't think it's not going to turn on the protected flag if you're just streaming a game, as far as I know. So I would say, are you absolutely sure that you actually used something with HDCP, actually tried to capture like an actual frame of a movie or something that was HDCP protected, and did it have like no screenshotting as the thing? Blah 238. This detour was Blah 238. This detour was Blah 238. This detour was all about startup and shutdown fades, but how would you implement fading in between in-game scenes? This shouldn't involve the Windows API, correct? Yeah. So once we're in our game, so if we're only talking about fading between our stuff, that we just can do in our own renderer, right? So that's nice because we don't have to deal with, we don't care about Windows at all. So fading in and out to black is really simple. That's just a case of modulating to 0. And if you see, we've actually already got, where's our Emacs window? There it is. We've actually already got that in here, I believe, in Handmade. We've actually already got that in here, I believe, in Handmade optimized.cpp. So when we do draw rectangle quickly, I think we've got it. Yeah, so you see we've got this color modulation happening here. So if you look at Handmade render group and who calls this, you can see that when we do this, there's an entry color parameter right there, right? And what that does, right, is it modulates the bitmap that we're drawing, whatever that texture is, it modulates it by a particular color. So if you wanted to fade something to black, it'd be really pretty easy to do. For example, inside our cutscene that was happening here, we could do, and I'll just sketch it out for you. If you want to do something where you said, like, okay, this particular layered scene is going to have a thing where it like fades, from black or something, right? I don't even know. So we just have a thing that's like fades from black. That's the thing that you set. Then you could do something, and in fact, I could even do something like fade in, T fade in. I don't know, right? Then what you could do is when we create these layered scenes, right, you can kind of see all the layered scenes happening here. Then on like that first shot, if we want that to fade in from black, we just say like, okay, 10% of the way in, I want the fade to have been completed, right? And everyone else doesn't have it set to anything. Then what we do is when we do render cutscene at a time, we go through the shots, we figure out whether we've got a shot. We said we're going to render a particular layered scene. Off we come, right? Inside render layered scene, we have T normal, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to say, what's the alpha value for this, right? What's the alpha value for the global thing, right? Or I shouldn't say alpha, but the global fade value, right? We've actually already got that in here, I believe, in Handmade optimized.cpp. So when we do draw rectangle quickly, I think we've got it. Yeah, so you see we've got this color modulation happening here. So if you look at Handmade render group and who calls this, you can see that when we do this, there's an entry color parameter right there, right? And what that does, right, is it modulates the bitmap that we're drawing, whatever that texture is, it modulates it by a particular color. So if you wanted to fade something to black, it'd be really pretty easy to do. For example, inside our cutscene that was happening here, we could do, and I'll just sketch it out for you. If you want to do something where you said, like, okay, this particular layered scene is going to have a thing where it like fades, you know, from black or something, right? I don't even know. So we just have a thing that's like fades from black. That's the thing that you set. Then you could do something, and in fact, I could even do something like fade in, you know, T fade in. I don't know, right? Then what you could do is when we create these layered scenes, right, you can kind of see all the layered scenes happening here. Then on like that first shot, if we wanted that to fade in from black, we just say like, okay, it, you know, 10, we just say like, okay, it, all the layers, I don't know, right? Fade in, you know, T fade in, I don't know, right? Then what you could do is when we create these layered scenes, right, you can kind of see all the layered scenes, right? Then what you could do is when we create these layered scenes, I don't know, right? Then what you could do is when we create these layered scenes, right, you can kind of see all the layered scenes happening here. Then on like that first shot, if we wanted that to fade in from black, we just say like, okay, it, you know, 10% of the way in, I want the fade to have been completed, right? And everyone else doesn't have it set to anything. Then what we do is when we do render cutscene at a time, we go through the shots, we figure out whether we've got a shot. We said we're going to render a particular layered scene. Off we come, right? Inside render layered scene, we have T normal, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to say, what's the alpha value for this, right? What's the alpha value for the global thing, right? What's the, or I shouldn't say alpha, but the global fade value, right? The whole shot. Whatever that shot fade is, so, you know, scene fade value. So scene fade value is going to by default be 1, which means that you're going to see, you know, the scene's just full bright. But what we're going to do is say, okay, if T normal is less than whatever the scene says its T fade in is, whatever that is, if that's the case, then we're going to set the scene fade value equal to the map, that like a map, a smooth 0 to 1 based on that, whatever that time period is, right? And we already did that. We already know exactly how to do this, right? We did it down here where we do right here, right? This function right here, clamp 0, 1 map to range, saying between these two, I have a value that lies between these other two values. I want you to give me a number from 0 to 1 that tells me how far through there I actually am, right? So I go in here and I say, okay, give me that. We know it comes between 0 and whatever the fade in value is, and I've got my T normal value, and so I want you to map that out into my fade value. Now I've just got a color, right? And that color can just be the scene fade value every time. Now remember, I'm not setting the alpha here. This is not an alpha fade. I'm not making it transparent. What I'm doing is I'm making it black, right? I'm starting it at black because if I multiply every color by 0, R, G, and B by 0, I get black. If I multiply them by less than 0, right, I get, you know, a fade to black. So 1 will give me the color, 0 gives me black, anywhere in between there lets me fade to that black, right? So now all I have to do is every time I render a layer, I just give it that color, right? So after we get the bitmap out, we do whatever the thing is we're doing here. Then at the end, I just pass that color, and I say, that's the color I want you to use for the bitmap, right? So now, when we do it, you know, we fade out, we go to black, and then we fade back in, right? And that's it. And now we can control that fade value by using that 0 to 1, like maybe you want, right? Now, pass that color, and I say, that's the color I want you to use for the bitmap, right? So now, when we do it, you know, we fade out, we go to black, and then we fade back in, right? And that's it. And now we can control that fade value by using that 0 to 1, like maybe you want to fade in a little slower, maybe you want it, you know, let's say I want a really slow fade instead of that 0.1 value that I stuck in there just arbitrarily, right? I could make it take half, you know, 10 seconds to fade in if I wanted to. And now we fade out, and then we slowly fade back in again, right? And that's how that goes. Now, there's a problem with that, I think. I have to think about it, which is that it's in the wrong alpha space. So what we probably need to do, like if you wanted to be correct about that, is we need to make sure that alpha correct about it's in the there's a problem. And that's how that goes. Now, there's a problem with that. There's a problem with that, I think. Now, there's a problem with that. And back in again, right? Slowly fade back in again. And that's how that goes. Now, and that's how that goes. Now, there's a problem with that, I think. There's a problem with that, I think. I have to think about it, which is that it's in the wrong alpha space. So what we probably need to do, like if you, it's in the wrong alpha space. There's a problem with that, I think. I have to think about it, which is that it's in the wrong alpha space. So what we probably need to do, like if you wanted to be correct about that, is we need to make sure that alpha is gamma corrected alpha. I think we're kind of out of time, so I really don't want to talk about that right now. But it's going to be ramped wrong. So really, what has to happen with that scene fade value is you'd have to go like, and I don't really remember where this was. It's probably in math. I don't know. I don't know where that is. No recollection whatsoever. Just none. Yeah, I just don't know. Let me double check that I'm actually right. Yeah, I mean, see, that just gets straight up used, right? So it's going to be like the wrong. It's going to modulate. It's modulating in linear space, I believe. Modulate by incoming color. Go from sRGB to linear brightness space. Oh, weird. No, we modulate the textures beforehand. Whoa. That seems really wrong to me. So I guess I was right. We would have put in the gamma, but that's only because I think we did this wrong. Would you agree with that assessment? Like, I feel like that's just wrong. Oh, but that's the dest that's just being loaded out. So never mind. Where do we do that? That's the dest that I was looking at there. So where does this happen? Where does this happen? When we do the mul PS, what are those texels in? When we load those out. Unpacked by linear samples. So these all get unpacked. SRLI, EPI 32, blah, 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 original dest. Here we go. Convert texture from 0 to 25 sRGB to linear. So they're in linear. So I feel like that should be okay. I have to think about that. Because if they're in linear and we're multiplying by linear, that feels like that should work. So I'm not really sure. We'll have to save that, because you notice what happened when I did that over a slow time period like that, right? It ramps up in like a very non-linear way to me. At least that's what it looks like to me. And so that looks more like the gamma curve was not being applied correctly in some way that I am not doing. Like, so something is not right, right? Something's not right. So that's something to look at. That might be something good to look at tomorrow. But anyway, there you go. And we're out of time. We're out of time. So that's it. So you're just going to have to deal with the fact that we are out of time. Just straight up out of time. Just like out of it. All right. So that's it. I will wrap it up for today. And I'm going to say in here to do, Casey, why does this fade seem to be wrong? It appears nonlinear, but if it is in linear brightness, shouldn't it appear linear? And maybe that's just we're not understanding it properly, or I don't know what, but I would like to know what's going on there because I don't really understand. So we'll leave it at that. We'll close it down. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's my pleasure coding with you, as always. If you would like to follow along with the source code, you can always do that by pre-ordering the game, handmadehero.org. This little handy-dandy pre-order button, it comes with the source code so that you can download it and follow along with everything I do. And it comes with the art pack, too, so if you can play around with those cutscenes just like I am. Maybe you can figure out why the fade is wrong before I do. It's a little challenge for you. We can go to other places too. The forum site, place to get your questions answered, ask questions about the series, all sorts of good stuff like that. There's an annotated episode guide up there you should definitely check out. There's a Patreon page. If you want to support the video series, you can pledge to that. Very much appreciated. We also have a tweet bot that tweets the schedule at you. And that tweet bot will tell you that we are off tomorrow. We are off tomorrow because it is the Molly Rocket holiday party, quote unquote. But we will be back on Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So I will see you guys then, when maybe we will look at the alpha problem and see why that fade was not linear. Who knows? Maybe we'll figure it out. Or maybe we'll do something else. Who knows? Only one way to find out, and that's to come back. Love to see you. Until then, have a good time programming, and I'll see you guys on the internet. Take it easy, everyone. Put basically our intro cutscene together, and it looked pretty darn snappy. I was very happy with it. I thought it was really exciting to see all of that coming together. And at the very end of last week on Friday in the Q&A, I think it might have been Miblo that asked the question, can we fade out the desktop? And I was sort of throwing together really quickly a way to make that happen, but I didn't have time to actually do it. So what I was thinking we might do today is just quickly take a look at that and see if I can get that working for him. It's not something we will do for Handmade Hero, but it's just, it's a reasonable question. And it seems like the least we can do for someone who spent layer window print. That I don't know if it'll work, but I'm just going to try that here, this to see if that gives us anything. And so really all we need to do is specify that this was a little too fast. I admit that stuff. Right after we sort of, I suppose, do some of these things for startup, we would probably create that window. Now, I'm just thinking, do I want to try to caption that stuff? Complete, instead of say, right? So I think that's okay. Yeah, I think that's okay. That should be fine. And that'll let us go down to 0, and then when we get to 0, right, that's roughly what we want. All right, so we got to make all this stuff work now. Let's see where we're at. This in for a pound. I don't really know where that comes from. For good, if that makes sense. So I might just do this. I feel like at this point, we're sort of in for a penny, in for a pound. I don't really know where that comes from. But, probably some kind of British thing, because if there's pennies and pounds involved, I'm not sure how many other places that could be other than British currency. So let's just assume that that was the case, and say, like, that's just how it goes sometimes. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, like, all right, cool. In here, we've got all our Win32 stuff. I'm going to straight up be like, hey, you know what? We've got a Win32 fade window, right? And that's just the thing. Here's the handle to the window. Here's the fade alpha. And here's, like, the state or something. Something like that, right? And I'm going to grab all this code out, and I'm going to make this into like a thing that actually just kind of understands its state and doesn't have to have so much stringiness to it, right? So like I'm going to just do something like update fade. I don't know, something like that at the moment. Let's just say that. And then what update fade will do is it's just going to take a look, right, at what the state of this thing actually was. And so we've got a couple states already, right? Our first state would be like Win32 fade fading in, Win32 fade showing or like waiting for show. Then there'd be Win32 fade inactive, basically. Win32 fade, I guess in this case we would also have fading in, waiting for show, inactive, and then we would also have like fading out, right? And each of these would be its own like thing. Yeah. So if I have a Win32 fade window, and this is the window, I don't know, we'll call it fader. In fact, we might just call it a Win32 fader. Something like that. Then I'm just going to go ahead and implement this, this thing in its entirety. So what we've got here is all of this code that we had before, right? Like all this stuff. Hopefully we can kind of make this a little bit more explicit and just kind of transform it into something a little more reasonable. So here's all that code, right? And I'm going to parcel it out into something hopefully a little bit more reasonable, right? So we start with this, and let's see what we've got. So if we're fading in, then really what we want to do is like do something like whatever the DT is, right? We're gonna fade that in. And so if we're fading out, we're just going to subtract that, right? And if the fade alpha goes below 0, 0, that's like our edge condition, our transition condition, right? And so at that point, when we go below 0, we're going to switch to a different state. We're going to say like, okay, we've got, if we're fading out, that would just give us Win32 fade, waiting for close or something, I guess, which would be our final state. Yeah? Okay. All right. So, when we're inactive, that actually doesn't have to do anything. Note, nothing to do, because we're just not doing anything. When we're in waiting for close, I think that's also nothing to do. That's just a state that we don't really care about, right? It's saying that like we're just kind of waiting for someone to shut us down. When we're waiting for show, that is just as soon as we do that the first time, we're only going to wait one time through the message loop. So really all we do in that case is immediately transition to the inactive state. And then for fading in, we're just going to do this. Right? Okay, so I think that's our complete state transition, if you will. So now we just have to actually do whatever it is that we needed to do, right? So when we do our plus equals dt, we would essentially say like, okay, whatever the actual, in fact, I guess this might be like this. So if it's greater than or equal to 1.0, what we would do is we would set the fade alpha equal to 1.0, and we'd transition to our waiting for show state. Once we get to our waiting for show state, that's where we need to actually do this whole nonsense, right? So when we go to our waiting for show state, this is what we actually want to do. Otherwise, we're going to just do the update. Same with this guy, I think. We want to do something like this. Where when we get down to 0, we've got to do whatever the thing is we're going to do. So we do like our set fade alpha with 0, for example, and then we would go ahead and and do our wait for close. And I think, is there anything else that happened in here? The quit on fade thing, so that's set fade alpha, show window, hide, that whole situation. So I think none of that actually needs to occur just yet. So I'm going to get rid of these guys. All right, so there's our little state diagram. Like I said, we haven't really super covered finite state machines here. So this is kind of a little cursory introduction. I mean, basically what we're doing is we're taking a bunch of code that was based on several different variables and then making explicit the different modes, right? And each mode gets a name, and then we have transitions between the modes, right? And so that's really all I was doing, and we'll cover those maybe a little bit more in detail later. But for now, you can kind of see what that transformation looked like. And that's just to make the code a little more explicit so it's not so hard to figure out what gets called when. So we'll tune that and debug that in a minute here, but now I just have to wire it up. But there's one more thing I want to do, and that is right here. So when we do our fade in, I feel like we may also want to do one more thing, which would be maybe like, yeah, like instead of fading in, we might do something like, you know, fading, you know, fading. Like game or something. I don't know. We might want to fade the game to black, and we might want to do that the same way. It seems better to make the game fade itself out to black, but I'm just going to throw this in here anyway, because why not, right? So I'm going to have fading game in here, and what fading game would do is it would do this exact same thing. It would say like, okay, if it's greater than 1.0, I want to do the thing here, but instead of this stuff, what I want to do is get rid of the game window, right? This is all game window stuff, right? I want to get rid of the game window, so it hides it at that point. And then I want to switch us to fading out, which will start, so we'll go to black, we'll get rid of the game window, then we'll come back from black to show the desktop, right? That was all that I was thinking there. So yeah, that seems reasonable to me. So yeah, game window, game window, game window, game window, game window. So you'd pass the game window into this thing like this probably. So in here I just say like begin fade in, and this would be like begin fade out, something like that. And this would be like, you know, init fader. Right? That sort of thing. And so when we go to do begin fade in, we would just say, all right, our state is going to be Win32 fading in. Our, you know, our fade alpha is going to be 0, 0 at the start. And then the fader, our fader state for this is going to be fading game. Probably name these states a little bit better in a second here once we see them all. And the alpha is going to be, again, 0, 0. And that would be pretty much all there would be to it, I would think. Our init fader is just going to take that construction code, which I kind of already nicely segregated there. I'm going to go ahead and make that this part right here. And I'm also going to go ahead and move this guy up because he's referenced by these guys, so we're just going to put him in up there as a utility. All right. So if we assume that that's going to work at all, which we don't know that it will, let's go ahead and make this happen here. Yeah, there we go. Hopefully that's all.